Marissa Campbell thought she knew everything about her husband Derek, until the day she found a second phone hidden in his truck, revealing an affair with a glamorous stranger named Jayden Vega. But Jayden wasn't just any woman, and Derek wasn't just unfaithful. What Marissa uncovered would twist her love into obsession and her betrayal into a perfectly planned murder. Marissa Campbell stood at the edge of her pristine kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee filling the room as soft morning sunlight spilled through the window. Everything in her life looked perfect from the outside. The house was spotless, the lawn freshly cut, and the framed wedding photos on the wall still looked as bright as the day they were taken. Friends often told her she was lucky. Lucky to have a stable job as a nurse at the local clinic, lucky to have a handsome and hard-working husband like Derek, and lucky to live in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood in Charleston. But lately, Marissa didn't feel lucky at all. Derek used to greet her every evening with a kiss and a warm smile. He used to ask how her day was, help with dinner, or just sit next to her on the couch and talk about nothing. But in the last few months, those simple moments had disappeared. He started coming home late, sometimes hours after he said he would. He blamed it on work, always work, late shifts, job site issues, urgent meetings with suppliers. But he wouldn't look her in the eye when he said it. He became secretive with his phone, always placing it face down on the table or keeping it in his pocket, even in the bathroom. Once, when she reached for it by mistake, he snatched it away so fast she flinched. At first, she brushed it off. She told herself it was the stress of their routines, the pressure of bills, or maybe just a rough patch. Every couple had them, right? But deep down, a different feeling started to grow. It wasn't sadness or even fear. It was suspicion, quiet, creeping suspicion that wrapped around her chest like a slow tightening rope. Derek had always been a man of patterns. He liked things scheduled, organized, and predictable. He left for work at 6:30 every morning and came home by 5 p.m. sharp. He mowed the lawn every other Saturday, checked the mailbox the same way, and had a strict weekly grocery list. But now, everything about him was shifting. She noticed new cologne in the bathroom, one she never bought, a shirt she'd never seen before hanging in his side of the closet, receipts from places they'd never visited, and one evening, she caught the faint smell of someone else's perfume on his jacket, floral and unfamiliar. Marissa couldn't sleep most nights. She lay awake in bed, listening to the sound of Derek's soft snoring, wondering what he was dreaming about, who he was dreaming about. She thought about confronting him, asking directly, but something stopped her. Fear, maybe, or denial. What if it was all in her head? What if she destroyed their marriage over a misunderstanding? Still, the doubt lingered. It fed on every lie he told, every moment he pulled away. There were no signs of physical abuse, no dramatic arguments, no bruises or broken things. Just silence, a cold, growing distance that neither of them acknowledged. They still said "I love you" before bed, but it sounded rehearsed, hollow. One afternoon, while doing laundry, Marissa found a single hotel keycard hidden in the pocket of Derek's jeans. No name, no receipt, just the card. Her heart skipped. She stared at it for minutes, her mind racing. He hadn't mentioned any hotel. There was no work trip, no out-of-town visit. She held the card like it was radioactive, afraid of what it might confirm. That night, she placed it back where she found it, careful not to disturb the fold. She smiled at Derek over dinner, asked about his day, and listened to another story about construction delays. He didn't notice the way she watched him, the way her hand shook just slightly when she picked up her glass. From that moment on, Marissa knew something was very, very wrong, and she knew she was going to find out exactly what. The heat was stifling that Saturday afternoon, thick and heavy like a warning. Derek was outside trimming the hedges, shirt off, earbuds in, completely unaware that his life was about to take a turn. Marissa watched him from the kitchen window, a dish towel clenched in her hand, her heart beating faster with each passing second. Her eyes weren't on him though. They were on his truck parked in the driveway. She had seen him get out of it just minutes ago, the driver's door swinging open, the familiar jingle of his keys, but one detail stood out: he didn't lock it. That never happened. Derek was obsessive about locking things. Doors, drawers, his phone, always locked, always secure. But not today. Whether it was forgetfulness or carelessness, it didn't matter. To Marissa, it felt like an invitation. She waited a few more minutes, watching his back as he moved around the yard, then dried her hands and stepped outside with forced calmness. The sun burned against her skin, and her legs felt stiff, like her own body was warning her to turn back. But she kept walking. She reached the truck and glanced over her shoulder. Derek hadn't noticed. She opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. It smelled like him: cologne, sweat, the faint scent of sawdust. She opened the glove compartment, rifling quickly through receipts, napkins, gum wrappers, then stopped. Tucked beneath an old insurance document was a second phone. It was a cheap model, something disposable, not the sleek smartphone he carried everywhere. Marissa's breath hitched. She held it in her hand like a snake that might bite. The screen lit up when she pressed the power button. Locked, of course. She stared at the passcode prompt, then typed in Derek's birthday. Wrong. Her birthday. Wrong again. Their anniversary. Still wrong. She tried one more. Their dog's name. The screen blinked, then suddenly unlocked. Her heart nearly stopped. The inbox opened directly to a thread labeled Jayden, dozens of unread messages. Her hand trembled as she scrolled. There were photos. Some were innocent, selfies, smiling faces. Others weren't. Marissa looked away, a sour taste flooding her mouth. The messages were intimate, raw, full of affection and emotion. Derek was pouring his heart out to this person, someone named Jayden. He called her beautiful, called her the only one who understands. There were confessions, private jokes and plans, so many plans. Dinner reservations, weekend trips, late-night rendezvous at cheap motels in nearby towns. Marissa's mind reeled. How long had this been going on? A few weeks? Months? Longer? She looked at the dates. Over a year. The realization hit her like a wave. This wasn't a fling. This was a relationship, one with real depth. Her husband had another life. A life she knew nothing about. She kept reading. Then something caught her attention. A photo from just 2 days ago. Taken in a hotel room. Derek, shirtless, arms around a stunning woman with long black hair and striking features. Jayden. But there was more. In one of the older messages, Jayden had written, "I wish I could tell your wife everything. She doesn't even know who you really are." Marissa froze. The meaning behind those words stuck in her brain like a thorn. She had assumed Jayden was just another woman, but now she wasn't sure. Suddenly, Derek's voice shouted from outside, breaking her trance. "You seen my other gloves?" he called out. Marissa's hand shot to the door handle. She shoved the phone back, slammed the glove box, and exited the truck. Her face was calm, her voice steady when she replied. But her insides were spinning. She knew now. She knew enough to know there was more. And she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered every secret Derek had tried so hard to hide. The name lingered in Marissa's mind like an echo she couldn't escape. Jayden. It sounded unfamiliar, yet intimate, like a shadow belonging to someone close, someone who had slipped into her life unnoticed. That night, long after Derek had fallen asleep beside her, Marissa crept out of bed, careful not to make the mattress creak. She tiptoed to the living room and opened her laptop, the screen casting a pale glow in the dark. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed the name into every search bar she could think of. Jayden Vega. It wasn't long before she found her. A public Instagram account appeared first. The profile picture showed a confident, striking woman with long jet-black hair, flawless makeup and a soft, almost haunting smile. Jayden was undeniably beautiful. Her features sharp but feminine, with a captivating look that seemed to reach straight through the screen. Her bio read, "Makeup artist, content creator, authentic, always." The page was filled with photos, bright, polished images of her at makeup events, on beaches, in cafes, Jayden exuded charisma, with every post drawing thousands of likes and comments from followers who adored her. But it wasn't just the images that caught Marissa's attention, it was the captions. Some were vague. Some truths take time to bloom. Others were more emotional. When you're finally seen for who you are, it's terrifying and freeing all at once. Scrolling deeper, Marissa stumbled across videos, vlogs where Jayden spoke directly to the camera in a warm, confident voice. And in one she said it clearly, with no hesitation. Coming out as transgender wasn't easy, but I'm done hiding who I am. If someone can't accept me, they don't deserve me. Marissa leaned back, the blood draining from her face. She stared at the screen, blinking slowly, trying to process the weight of what she had just learned. Jayden wasn't just a mistress, she was a transgender woman. Derek hadn't only lied about the affair, he had hidden an entirely different truth about who he was and what he desired, a truth Marissa had never even considered. Questions flooded her mind. Had Derek known Jayden before the transition? Was this about love, or was it something deeper, an identity he had kept buried his entire life? And more importantly, what else hadn't he told her? Marissa felt her world shifting beneath her feet. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was deception on a level she couldn't comprehend. Her husband, the man she had trusted, built a home with, shared a bed with, had lived a secret life not just behind her back but beyond her understanding. She began looking for more. On a hunch, she checked her shared email account with Derek and found several messages in the trash, deleted but not yet gone. There were confirmation emails for hotel stays under different names, gift purchases sent to an address in Colombia, and even PayPal transfers labeled only as services. Every digital trail led to Jayden. Digging deeper, she found Jayden's Facebook and a few tagged photos. One showed Derek in the background of a group selfie at a party. Another was a candid shot of them walking side by side in a park, holding hands. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold. But the more she saw, the more real it became. Marissa wasn't angry, not yet. What she felt was colder, a tightening in her chest, a quiet, simmering sense of control slipping through her fingers. She had no place in this hidden story. She was the outsider now, the one looking in. And as she closed the laptop, her reflection faintly visible in the black screen, she knew one thing for certain. Derek had gone too far this time. She wasn't going to confront him with tears or questions. She was going to watch, learn, wait, and when the time was right, she would strike back in a way he'd never see coming. The days that followed passed like a slow-burning fuse. Marissa walked through her daily life with mechanical calm, folding laundry, prepping meals, driving to the clinic, but inside her mind, something dark and focused was taking shape. She didn't confront Derek. She didn't cry or scream or beg for answers. Instead, she watched him more closely than ever. Every smile he gave her, every excuse he offered, every late night was logged silently in her memory, like evidence stacked neatly in a file. She no longer had doubts. What she needed now was proof. Hiring a private investigator wasn't something Marissa had ever imagined herself doing. But on a cold Thursday morning, after Derek had left for work, she made the call. The man she contacted came highly recommended through an old college friend, a former detective named Tony Greer. Tony had worked high-profile infidelity cases before and had a reputation for being both quiet and ruthless when it came to the truth. Marissa didn't hesitate. She gave him every detail she had: the secret phone, Jayden's full name, the hotel receipts, the messages. Tony didn't ask unnecessary questions. He only said he'd get started immediately. Within a week, he had something. Marissa met him in a parking lot outside a strip mall, both of them seated in their own cars with the windows cracked just slightly. He handed her a thick manila envelope without a word. Inside were printed photographs, time-stamped to the minute. Derek was in nearly every one, laughing, embracing, checking into motels with Jayden. Some photos were intimate, others more subtle, the two of them at a quiet lakeside bench. Jayden resting her head on Derek's shoulder, Derek brushing her hair back from her face. The images felt like punches. They were real, unstaged, undeniable. Tony had also obtained video footage, short clips taken from a distance using a zoom lens. One showed Derek getting out of his truck at a remote motel just outside Columbia, looking around cautiously before walking quickly to room 108. Moments later, Jayden opened the door and pulled him inside. Another video showed them walking out an hour later hand in hand, as if they didn't have a care in the world. But the most damning part was in the written report Tony included. It detailed financial transactions that even Marissa hadn't uncovered. Over the past 10 months, Derek had sent Jayden over $40,000, small amounts that added up. He had used Venmo, PayPal, and even withdrawn cash from ATMs near Jayden's address. He told banks they were business expenses. But the truth was written in black and white. When Marissa finished reading, she didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Her hands were cold, but steady. She thanked Tony and promised to be in touch if she needed more. He nodded once and drove away. That night, Derek came home smiling, kissed her cheek, and told her about a stressful day at the site. Marissa nodded, played along, served him his favorite casserole, and laughed at his dumb jokes. He had no idea that she now knew everything. No idea she had watched him with another woman. No idea she had held photographic evidence of his second life in her hands just hours earlier. As he drifted off to sleep in their bed, snoring softly, Marissa stared at the ceiling, wide awake. She had learned all she needed to. The affair wasn't a phase. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, passionate, and sustained. And Derek hadn't just cheated. He had lied with precision, with intention. The mask he wore was flawless. But now she had seen what was underneath. And what terrified her most wasn't how far he had gone. It was how calm she felt planning what she would do next. Marissa stood at the kitchen counter, slicing strawberries with slow, careful movements, her eyes fixed on the rhythm of the blade. The sunlight outside was warm, the birds chirping in the trees, and Derek was in the shower humming a song she didn't recognize. On the surface, everything appeared peaceful. But inside her, a storm had settled into stillness, controlled, dangerous stillness, the kind that came before everything fell apart. By now Marissa had memorized every detail of Derek's betrayal, every timestamp, every transaction, every embrace caught on camera. But she didn't let it show. She smiled more, cooked his favorite meals. She even initiated conversations, laughing softly when he made clumsy jokes, pretending to be the same woman who believed in their marriage. He never suspected a thing. That's when she decided to take control. Not through confrontation, not through divorce or rage. She wanted something final, something clean. Derek hadn't just destroyed their life. He had replaced it, rebuilt it secretly with someone else, and left her behind in the ruins. And now he was going to disappear just as quietly as he had cheated. Marissa suggested a weekend getaway, just the two of them. She pitched it as a chance to reconnect, a quiet cabin in the mountains to rekindle what was left of their bond. Derek hesitated at first, saying work was demanding, but she pressed gently, layering guilt over affection. Eventually, he agreed. She booked the cabin 2 hours away, nestled deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was remote, private, surrounded by dense woods. No cell service. No neighbors. No chance of anyone stumbling upon them. She chose it deliberately, selected the dates, mapped the route, and even brought a bottle of expensive red wine that Derek liked. Every detail was rehearsed in her mind. The day they left, Marissa packed everything with surgical precision: blankets, food, toiletries, and something else hidden beneath the layers of clothes. A small glass vial containing a clear, tasteless liquid. It wasn't easy to get, but through a quiet channel she had obtained something strong enough to stop a heart if mixed in the right dose. She wasn't a murderer, not yet. But she was prepared. The drive to the cabin was quiet, almost pleasant. Derek played music, his hand resting casually on her thigh. He smiled like he had nothing to hide, like he truly believed she had forgiven him. Marissa nodded along, eyes on the winding road, already counting down the hours. The cabin was exactly as described, wooden, rustic, with a fireplace and a view that stretched across a sea of trees. Derek was impressed, complimented her for picking such a romantic spot. That night they sat by the fire, drinking wine as the flames danced between them. Marissa poured his glass herself, watching carefully as he took each sip. Not yet, she needed one more day. In the morning she suggested a hike, just a short one, she said. A trail that led to a lookout point. Derek agreed easily, throwing on a backpack while she filled their water bottles. The poison was already dissolved in his. They walked for nearly an hour, following the trail deeper into the woods. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, and the air was crisp. Marissa watched Derek carefully, waiting for the signs. At first, nothing. Then his pace slowed. He wiped his forehead, breathing harder than usual. His hands trembled slightly. When he turned to ask if they could rest, his voice cracked. That's when Marissa knew it was working. She led him to a clearing, helped him sit, and placed a blanket on the ground. He was sweating now, gasping for air, confused, panicked. But she said nothing. She just sat beside him, watching his face as realization began to flicker in his fading eyes. She didn't speak a word. She didn't need to. This was his silence, returned to him. And she was just getting started. The clearing was quiet, except for the distant hum of wind weaving through the trees. Sunlight filtered down in sharp broken lines, casting shadows across Derek's face as he slumped slowly onto his side. His breathing had turned shallow and erratic, his lips beginning to lose color. His eyes, wide and glassy, darted toward Marissa as if searching for some final explanation, some thread of reality he could still grasp. But she sat still, legs crossed at the knee, her hands folded in her lap. She had no intention of giving him closure. For a brief moment he tried to speak. His mouth opened, and a soft, hoarse whisper escaped. But no words formed. His body was failing him. Marissa tilted her head, studying him like an artifact behind glass. There was no fear in her face, no regret. Only calculation. It didn't take long. After a final, broken gasp, Derek's chest stopped rising. His body twitched once, then settled. Stillness returned to the woods like it had never been disturbed. A squirrel darted through a tree limb nearby. A bird chirped in the distance. Nature, untouched and uncaring, moved on without him. Marissa checked his pulse just to be sure. Nothing. She stood, brushed herself off, and looked around. There was no visible trail, no signage nearby. This part of the forest was unmarked, chosen precisely for its isolation. She had memorized the route from the trailhead and had deliberately led them off course during the hike, using landmarks only she had tracked on her phone days before. The spot where Derek now lay was at least a mile from the nearest known path. It would take a trained eye to find him, and even then, it might be too late. She retrieved the empty water bottle from beside his body and tucked it into her backpack. The blanket, too, folded tightly to erase any signs of their presence. She made sure her footprints around the area were minimal, stepping in the same places she had before. She left only one thing behind: Derek's watch. A luxury timepiece with a scratched silver face that had once been his pride. She slid it from his wrist and placed it gently beside a moss-covered log. It was deliberate, a marker for the story she was about to tell. On the walk back to the cabin, Marissa kept her pace steady. She rehearsed everything in her mind. Her face was blank, her thoughts sharp. By the time she reached the door, she had already crafted her next move. Derek had gone off on a solo hike. They had argued the night before. He had stormed out that morning with his backpack and said he needed air. Hours passed, and he didn't return. She searched. She panicked. She waited until dusk before deciding she had to get help. Back in the cabin, she sat at the edge of the bed and composed herself. She placed a few items around the wine bottle. 2 glasses, an open bag of chips to suggest a normal, peaceful evening. She even snapped a photo of herself by the fireplace, scheduled to post it online later that night with a casual caption. Every detail mattered. She had no intention of looking guilty. The key to deception, she knew now, was precision. Calm, unwavering precision. As darkness settled in, she took one last look out the window toward the woods. The wind had picked up slightly, the branches swayed, and somewhere far beyond the trees, her husband's lifeless body lay beneath the silence of nature. Marissa turned out the lights and lay down in bed, pulling the blanket over herself with deliberate ease. By morning, she would be the grieving wife of a missing man, and no one would ever suspect the truth was sleeping just beneath the surface of her calm, tearless eyes. The next morning, Marissa woke just after sunrise. The cabin was cold, the fire long since died out, and the forest outside was cloaked in a thin layer of fog. She dressed slowly, carefully selecting clothes that looked worn, practical, something a concerned wife might wear after a sleepless night. She kept her hair uncombed, her eyes slightly puffy from hours of pretending to cry. In the mirror, she rehearsed her face. Not panic, but worry, not fear, but confusion. Subtle, believable. She waited until 9:00 a.m. before placing the first call to the local ranger station. Her voice, when she spoke to the dispatcher, was shaky but composed. She explained that her husband, Derek, had gone for a solo hike the previous morning after a small argument. He hadn't returned. She had waited, hoping he'd come back on his own. But now she was scared. Could they help? Could someone search the trails nearby? Within hours, 2 forest rangers arrived at the cabin. Marissa greeted them, wrapped in a light jacket, arms crossed, against the chill, concern etched perfectly across her face. She repeated her story. Derek had said he needed space, packed a water bottle, and walked off toward the east trail. She hadn't seen him since. He wasn't answering his phone, and she didn't know what else to do. The rangers took notes, asked a few questions, and promised to begin a search immediately. Marissa nodded, clenching her hands tightly as they turned to leave, just the right amount of tension to seem genuine. As they disappeared into the woods, she knew they wouldn't find him. Not yet. She had chosen the spot carefully, made sure to steer him far from the main trails. The forest was vast and full of misleading paths. Unless someone knew exactly where to look, it could be days before a body turned up, or never. But Marissa wasn't finished. She returned home that evening, and made another call, this time to the police in Charleston. She filed a missing person report, giving them the same version of the story. Derek had left. He was upset. He never came back. She even uploaded a photo of them from the trip, smiling by the cabin porch, her head resting on his shoulder. The perfect image of a couple trying to make things work. The news spread quickly. Derek's friends shared the report online. His coworkers expressed shock and concern. People offered help search. Marissa accepted their sympathy with practiced grace, always maintaining the look of a woman clinging to hope. She joined one search party herself, wandering aimlessly through a section of trail miles from where she knew his body actually lay. The days passed, and the case stalled. No leads, no signs, no evidence, just a missing man and a heartbroken wife. But there was one person who didn't seem convinced. Jayden. After news of Derek's disappearance made it to local media, Jayden posted a tribute video online. A softly lit, tearful monologue where she described Derek as kind, loving, misunderstood. She said she had been in contact with him as recently as the week before, that he had confided in her, and that he was planning to make major life changes. She never said Marissa's name, but the implication hung heavily in the air. Marissa watched the video in silence, her hands folded tightly in her lap. It was a risk. Jayden was emotional, impulsive, and if she pushed too hard, the questions might start to turn in the wrong direction. Marissa needed to do something final. Something that would shift the attention away from herself completely. because the secret she had buried in the woods might be resting quietly for now. But secrets never stayed buried forever. 3 months had passed since Derek's disappearance, and the story had begun to fade from headlines. The police had no leads, no suspects, and no reason to believe foul play was involved. It was treated as an unfortunate case of a man lost in the wilderness. Perhaps an accident, perhaps a tragic choice. The search efforts slowed. Volunteers stopped showing up. Even Derek's friends, once so insistent on daily updates, began to accept that he might never be found. Marissa moved through the days with quiet composure. She returned to work, kept her routine simple, and offered polite, weary smiles when people whispered condolences in the hallway. Her home, once filled with reminders of Derek, was carefully rearranged. Photographs were taken down, drawers cleaned out, his clothes donated. She told others it was too painful to keep things the same. In truth, it was about control, eliminating any trace of the man who had betrayed her and the life she had chosen to erase. She believed she had gotten away with it, until one morning, while scrolling through her social media feed, a familiar image caught her eye. It was a screenshot from Jayden's latest video, a new tribute, filmed in her apartment, where she sat beside a memorial candle and spoke about loss, grief, and secrets. But Marissa wasn't paying attention to Jayden's words. Her eyes were locked on something small but unmistakable in the blurred background. A watch. Silver, with a distinct scratch across the face. Derek's watch. The one Marissa had left behind in the woods, placed deliberately by his body as a symbolic gesture. Something explained his disappearance when the time came. But somehow, impossibly, it was now sitting on a shelf in Jayden's apartment. Panic flooded Marissa's chest. She paused the video, zoomed in. There was no doubt. She remembered that watch vividly, had seen it nearly every day of her married life. And she had left it in the clearing beside Derek's body. The question wasn't just how Jayden had it, but what else she knew. The next day the police reopened the case. They hadn't planned to. But a local journalist following the story had noticed the same watch in the video and reported it. A detective took a second look at the original missing person report and noticed something odd. Marissa had never mentioned Derek wearing a watch on the day he vanished, yet somehow, his personal item had resurfaced in the hands of the woman he'd been secretly involved with. Questions began to swirl. A new search was launched, quiet, methodical, and with better resources. It didn't take long. Using tracking dogs and updated drone scans, a search team uncovered a shallow grave less than a mile off the trail near the Blue Ridge cabin. Inside was a decomposed body with the remnants of a hiking pack, and near it, a broken phone. The toxicology report revealed poison in the victim's system, lethal levels of a rare chemical compound. One not commonly found, but traceable. Investigators backtracked purchases and shipments. Within days, a digital paper trail led directly to Marissa's name. She was arrested in her kitchen, still in her nurse's scrubs, halfway through brewing a pot of coffee. At trial, the evidence was laid out piece by piece: motive, means, opportunity. The photos from the investigator, the payments, the watch, the poison, and finally, the unraveling timeline of her carefully staged weekend. Jayden testified, her voice steady. She said she never intended to expose anyone. That watch, she explained, had been mailed anonymously, left at her doorstep in a plain package with no note. She only displayed it because it reminded her of Derek. She never knew where it had come from. But the jury didn't need Jayden to explain. The facts were too sharp. The story too precise. Marissa was convicted of first-degree murder. Her calm had finally cracked, and the secret she tried to bury didn't just return, it screamed through the trees, until the world was forced to hear it.